A while ago we unlocked all mystery gift events, in which in most cases you are able to fight and catch a Pokemon you normally can't. Some however require a bit more effort. For Deoxys you need to find the shortest path to the triangle, and for Mew you need to play hide and seek on Faraway Island. And this got me thinking, how does Mew decide which direction to walk in? So I decided to analyze the code in the game to figure it all out. Let's get started. First we'll get into some basic rules that apply to Mew. As you can see, for most of the steps we take, Mew is invisible to the player. But sometimes we can see where Mew is located. By carefully counting our steps, we can figure out when Mew does these things. First of all, the grass in which Mew is located will shake every 4th step. And every 8th step, Mew will become visible to the player. These are also things we can find in the code. But there are of course more things we can learn from it. Every 9th step, Mew won't move and will stay in its place. The step counter counts until it hits 9,999. After that it is resetted back to 0. And the step counter is also resetted when you re-enter the room. Lastly, the step counter is also saved to the save file when saving the game. So when you load your save while playing hide and seek, it will remember how many steps you've taken so far. These are the basic rules that apply to Mew when playing hide and seek. Next we will need to analyze how Mew decides which direction to move in. To make this easier and to showcase examples for the video, I enabled that Mew is always visible. This will make it easy for us to see how Mew reacts and what direction they walk in. So now it's time to dive into the algorithm. How does Mew check to best move away from the player? Well, the first thing that is done is calculate how far away Mew was before the player moved. So it'll calculate the difference in tiles on the X and Y axis. After this the game first has code that checks if Mew and the player are close to a rock. Mew will move a bit differently if that's the case, so we'll cover that a bit later. First we will talk about how Mew in general determines to get the furthest away from the player. The game checks if Mew should move north, east, south or west. It only ceases as a possibility if the original absolute distance is already greater than 0. Meaning that if Mew and the player are on the same axis, it will always try to move further along that axis, instead of trying to move to the sides. It is of course possible that 2 outcomes fit this criteria. Let's take a look at this example. The absolute distance on the X and Y axis are now both greater than 0, meaning that Mew, in this scenario, could move either north or east. The algorithm sees both as valid options and will choose one at random. The choosing of the direction is done by taking the total number of steps taken modulo the amount of possible directions. If this whole sequence is not able to choose a direction for Mew, then Mew turns into a dirty cheater. Let's take a look at this example. Mew will only move west until it hits this boulder. Since we share the same y-axis, it will not move north or south with the previous code like we discussed before. It needs to be at least 1 away. So what will Mew do now? Well, it actually depends on what direction you will move in. The algorithm now decided to cheat a little and check what direction you have moved in. If you go north, then the algorithm sees that and will make Mew move south instead. And that's the same for the other way around. But what happens if you continue to move west? Then it will pick the first option that is possible. In the case of the y-axis, it will check north first, so if that's possible, then Mew will go there. Otherwise it'll move south. In the case of the x-axis, it will check east first. If the algorithm won't pick a direction from this code either, then Mew will start doing random things. Because if Mew reaches this point of the code, it cannot move without getting closer in some way. The algorithm now checks what directions Mew could possibly move in. Let's take a look at this example. In this case, that's either north or west. What direction Mew will go in is now randomly chosen based on how many steps are taken. But it would be fun to cheat a bit more in this part of the algorithm and check what direction the player moves in. If the player moves north in this example, then Mew should move south, because if it moves west, then it will be an instant game over for Mew. Now there's only one part of the algorithm that is left to be discussed, and that is if Mew and the player are close to a rock. Like mentioned before, Mew will move a bit differently if that is the case. So when is this part of the code exactly executed? This part of the algorithm is only used when the player is on the same axis as the rock, and Mew is on the other side of the rock. Mew will now try to move to the same axis as us and the rock, but only if it is possible to reach it in one step. But what happens if Mew is already on the same axis as you and the rock? Then Mew will try to move away on the same axis if possible. And with that, we've covered the entire algorithm for Mew's AI. Now the last thing we can do is find the shortest path to catch Mew. But the shortest path might be a bit different than what you expect. You might expect something like this. Corner Mew in the upper right corner and force an encounter like that. But there is even a faster method. Watch this. That's a bit weird, right? Mew walked east 3 times, even though in our algorithm we discussed that it should alternate based on the total number of steps we've taken. And Mew is actually still doing that. At the moment we are running and taking twice the amount of steps that Mew is taking, meaning that Mew will skip the north option and will continue to walk east until we're on the same axis. After that we just follow Mew north until it stops at the 9th step, and that will give us the quickest encounter possible for Mew. And that is everything there is to cover about Mew's hide and seek game. Before ending the video, however, I want to talk a bit about the Oxys and a little game you play with the triangle. It is too short to talk about it on its own video, so we'll just talk about it a bit here. Like mentioned in the beginning of the video, you have to find the shortest path to the triangle. But how many steps are you allowed to take between each interaction? Well, here's a little list covering all the amount of steps we can take between each interaction. Each time we interact with the triangle, it will move to a different place and change the palette of it to signify that we're getting closer to summoning the Oxys. With the current setup, you are forced to end facing the triangle in this way. But what happens if we increase the total number of steps we can take for the last rock interaction? Well, let's see what happens.
It's the sky!
And that is everything I wanted to talk about today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.